Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit brief and comparatively simple because what I really want to do is explain, like a really basic Marxian critique of capitalism, but in a way that is, more understandable as just like a normal person in 21st century life. And that thing about capitalism is its homogenization and its anti-human force. The way that I was thinking about this earlier was that it applies to everything under capitalism, but even something simple like shirts, for example, right? And I was thinking about this actually because of a conversation I had with somebody about how much cheaper it is to get tailored clothing in India, and I was just thinking about tailored clothing in general and how we don't really have that in the United States anymore. And the reason why is because under capitalism, the requirement, and this is not a suggestion, this is not an incentive that just sits out in the ether. This is the requirement, the fundamental requirement of all entities engaged in a capitalist economy is that they must produce profit, and they must produce more profit than they did previously. Otherwise, they will be replaced, destroyed, eliminated. Something's going to happen to them. Somebody's going to figure out how to get more profit out of it, right? And so when it comes to basic things like clothing, people used to have a much more direct relationship with their clothing. Either they were making it themselves, or somebody in their family was making it, or, and this is in early forms of or early stages of capitalism rather, or you'd go down to like your clothing shop, I guess, wherever the people who spend their time making clothing would be. And the same applies to shoes. The same applies to, actually, I'm not sure about jewelry. I guess jewelry is still, I'm not sure, but the point is, we don't live in that world anymore. We don't live in a world where people's relationship with their clothing comes directly from their relationship with a human being, that being that their family or the local clothes person, right? Instead, we live in a world where your clothes are produced to a certain standard for the purposes of making money for a corporation. And I'm not saying that that's all negative. I'm not saying that that's only negative. But what I am saying is that is a less human experience than the experiences that we previously had available. Capitalism as an economic system forces things to not only become more profitable, but in the pursuit of profitability to all become very similar. That's what I was referring to when I said the homogenization effect of capitalism. And the one similarity that these things will all share necessarily because of the profit motive, because of the fact that these companies and the ways that in our economy itself and the way that we engage with the world is changing not because of a natural disaster, not because of some sort of political crisis, but because they all need to adapt to whatever circumstances in order to produce more profit than they were previously able to. And so because that's the driving force, all of these things in our lives, all these things that we engage with are also increasingly becoming less and less human. As capitalism moves forward and invades more aspects of our lives that previously were not, relying on profit production and or production in general as the force behind them. I mean, think about food as well, for example. And food is a lot closer to how it used to be before, or before like more industrial sorts of food products were offered. But people in general, they're fed by their family, their community, their neighbors, their mom, grandma, cousin, little brother, whatever it may be. But now, in addition to those still existing, still enduring forms of getting food, you also have TV dinners, and you have, we have 47 grams of protein, we have this, we have that. And my point in this video is really just to say that all of these things, despite the fact that they manifest in different ways, despite the fact that they happen for different reasons, like on the micro level, it's like maybe this food brand decided to standardize its serving sizes in this way and do this and do that. Those things may not all directly, they may not all be simply, I want to make more money, but ultimately the driving force behind these changes will always be the profit motive. And giving away the future of our society itself to the profit motive is a deeply irrational, and I would argue dangerous, I would argue disastrous, I would argue suicidal thing to do. Because at the end of the day, humanity, society, communities, all of these things are fundamentally the same. Politics even. All these things are simply people interacting with people. And the idea that the best way for people to interact with one another is to try to put all of their life force into acquiring currency and or into increasing production for the purposes of acquiring currency is ridiculous. And it will not stand. But, that's not for me to decide. That's for the historical record. But I just want to say that as a human being, as a person who values other human beings, the future that we should look towards, especially my fellow socialists, we must be cognizant of the human experience and including the human experience in economic life. We cannot build an economy that separates people from other people in the ways that we have, because not only is the economy built in such a way to take away our power, but also it makes us all less human. And I sometimes, I do get lost in thought and I'll think about what kind of a world we could have. I'll get stuck in the ifs and, oh, imagine, imagine, imagine. And one of the most painful things for me as a person, especially a person who grew up very poor in South Central Los Angeles as a black man, the most painful thing for me is to think about the fact that there were and have always been opportunities to do something different, to do something better, to pursue a different course, and that those paths have not been taken. We must take a different path in the future.